The stars are right, and that means it's time for another episode of The Whisper in Darkness. I'm your host, the Manfromleng. Thank you very much for joining me today. On this episode, we are continuing our look at the player cards in the Dunwich Legacy Investigator Expansion for the benefit of new players. This is part 1 of our look at the Survivor cards. We are going to take a look at Dark Horse, Fire Axe, Newspaper Level 0, Peter Sylvestre Level 0, and Peter Sylvestre Level 2. There are spoilers throughout if you care about that sort of thing. If you enjoy what you hear, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Just a quick reminder of how we rate cards here on The Whisper in Darkness. The best of the best get an Elder Sign, while the worst of the worst get an Auto Fail, and the cards in between get a +1, 0, or Elder Thing respectively. Cards that you build around, or are good in one particular deck, get a Bless token, while cards we believe are destined for the list of taboos or are simply bad for the game get a Curse token. Before we get started, I'd like to thank the patrons of this channel for their tremendous support. The Arkham Horror LCG community is amazing, and these people have gone above and beyond to bring you content like these player card reviews. If you'd like to support the channel's goals and see your name on this list, head over to patreon.com, sign up for a tier of your choice, and claim your rewards. That would be awesome. Special thanks to Coleman Rochity for the amazing art that graces the channel, Nicole Fiscus for the new Whisper in Darkness logo that I use for the podcast, and Nate Lost in Time and Space for the intro as well as the overlays. Thank you very much. I couldn't do it without you. Without further ado, let's get started. Hello Arkham Horror fans, welcome back! We are continuing with our review of the player cards in the Dunwich Legacy Investigator Expansion for the benefit of new players. We're moving on to Survivor. The first card is Dark Horse. It is a 3-cost asset that has a willpower skill icon condition trait. Limit 1 per investigator. During the upkeep phase, you may choose to not gain resources. While you have no resources in your resource pool, you get +1 willpower, intellect, combat, and agility. I can't think of many other cards in this game that are the name of an archetype for a deck that continues to this day, 5 years later. If there is an investigator who can take Survivor cards, there is probably a Dark Horse build out there for them.
Yep. I mean, it gives you +1 to all your stats. Like,
that's good.
that's really good.
Yeah.
And thankfully, this card pool also fleshes this archetype out enough to where if you just have core in Dunwich, you can build a Dark Horse deck.
Oh, that's true, because so one thing that's nice about Dark Horse is that you have the option to take the resource. So what that means is that if you have in your hand or in play ways to utilize resources, you don't have to lock yourself down at 0 to make good use of Dark Horse. Good example: if you take Dig Deep, then all of a sudden you can be, say you're Wendy and you have Dark Horse and you have Dig Deep going. You could be at 4 willpower. You take a resource in upkeep. You then spend it in the Mythos phase. You're at 5 willpower, and then Dark Horse puts you at 6 willpower. It's pretty good. You're going to pass that Rotting Remains test. So I guess what that means is that between Core and Dunwich, even at the 0 XP level, like, the Dark Horse as a deck type kind of gets flushed out. Like, you don't need a lot more in order for it to get going.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And if you're playing Ashcan Pete, Duke will get the benefit of the +1 combat and the +1 intellect when you use his actions, which is really nice.
Oh, yeah. And then right at that point, if you have, like, Ashcan Pete, Dark Horse, and, like, magnifying glasses, like, he's in a really good shape. And then he's investigating at 6. That's pretty good.
Yeah, there was a reason many considered Ashcan Pete to be one of the best investigators in the game for a very long time.
Oh, yeah. Surely it's solo, because like, Duke is so versatile. Yeah. Man, we could just talk all day about Dark Horse, I gotta be honest. I think the ones that are a little more awkward, probably if you're not using all 4 stats very well, then Dark Horse gets a little more awkward. I'm thinking like Agnes, because she's only using... If you build your Agnes deck in such a way that you're only using your willpower, then Dark Horse is a little more unwieldy. Plus, Mystic cards are expensive.
Manfromleng had said that every investigator that can take Dark Horse has a deck built around it, but does Jenny Barnes have a Dark Horse deck?
Oh, yeah. Even in Core Dunwich, because Jenny can take any of the talents that let you spend resources to do things, So Jenny can just, as I was saying earlier with the example with Wendy, even Jenny, who gets extra resources, she can just spend them, and spend them to boost her tasks, and then trigger Dark Horse. So she can hang out at 0 resources and be just fine because all her extra resources that she's getting, she can just immediately turn them into other skill boosts. So even Jenny, Dark Horse.
There you go.
Yep.
I would go so far as saying that, when Dark Horse was released, it was so omnipresent in the, among Survivor decks that I think it actually pushed Survivor decks away from a lot of the expensive Survivor events that were available. Survivors do have quite a few expensive events. The one that comes to mind is Cunning Distraction, which costs, I think, 5. But there are others in there, and Dark Horse was being played in so many different decks that I think a lot of those Survivor events just sort of got pushed out of the card pool by this card, that people just weren't willing to pay for them. And I do agree that unlike, during our discussion of the Mystic cards, we talked a lot about Jim and Chaos Bag manipulation and how the support for that sort of playstyle just wasn't there. They did flesh out the Dark Horse build. So as soon as this card hit, there was Dark Horse Wendy, there was Dark Horse Ashcan, there was Dark Horse everybody. And even to this day, when a new investigator comes out that can play Dark Horse, somebody will build a Dark Horse deck around them. I even tried to build a Dark Horse Charlie Kane deck, Charlie being the new the neutral investigator who will be released in the Scarlet Keys expansion that's coming up. And actually, that's the first time I pulled Dark Horse out of the deck because I don't know if it works in Charlie, to be honest. His stat line would suggest it does, but Charlie has very specific deck building requirements, I think. So maybe there won't be a Dark Horse Charlie deck. I'm sure somebody will still try. How would we rate this one?
I mean, this is an Elder Sign, right? Like, this card was format defining. I think nowadays it'd be a bless.
Yeah, I agree.
You 100% build around playing Dark Horse. But yeah. I think within the confines of just Core and Dunwich, this card is like easily one of the best cards in the card pool.
Yeah, I agree because if you take other 0 XP cards like the Talents or what we're going to be talking about soon, Fire Axe, it already pulls its weight. So yeah, in the confines of Core and Dunwich, yeah, I'd say this is another sign because you're going to be spending a lot of resources. At this point in the card pool, you don't have a lot of ways to get lots of resources. Like, you have emergency cash, and often that's about it. So what that means is that when you spend them, it's hard to have a deck that has tons of resources, has all the money it needs. Money is scarce at this point. So playing Dark Horse works because you're going to be at 0 resources like half the time if you're playing the cards in your hand. So yeah, Dark Horse really works. I mean, it's got a few awkward interactions, like Dark Horse and Lucky doesn't work out very well because you're at 1 resource in order to play your Lucky or say your Ward of Protection, which means you're not getting the benefit of Dark Horse at that point, which is kind of awkward. But other than that, like, you'll be fine. Just take some talents, take some ways to spend money, and you're gonna do it.
You just use Lucky in Mythos phase.
Yeah, there you go. Use your Lucky in Mythos phase, and then you're set for the turn. Yeah. So, yeah, in a general sense, I think if your card pool is Core and Dunwich, you can just slot Dark Horse into your deck, and you will probably make your deck better. Yeah, even if you don't rely on it. But then there's a lot of support, so you can put in cards that synergize with Dark Horse, and then your deck's gonna be even better. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd agree with you that these days Dark Horse would probably be considered a blessed token because you need to build around it to a greater extent. But in Dunwich and Revised Core, this is pretty much an Elder Sign. You can't really go wrong with putting this in your Survivor deck. And I think the other thing that helps Survivors is the fact that they can play very low to the ground, so they don't really need a lot of resources anyway. So you play Dark Horse, you play a Fire Axe, And then you can sort of just get by on, picking up a resource here and there, and you don't need a lot of resources, especially with somebody like Ashcan Pete who leans on Duke so heavily to do a lot of his fighting and investigating. You're not really, you don't really need to play a lot of extra cards to help him out. You're generally committing skills or something like that, but you've already basically got your investigation and fighting tool on the table from the get-go, so you don't have to pay for it. So that really helps survivors in this case. But this card continues to be played in many a different deck. It had a huge impact on the card pool when it was released in, I believe it was Undimensioned and Unseen, and continues to this day. The second card we're going to look at plays very, very well with Dark Horse. This is Fire Axe, 1-cost asset with a combat skill icon, item, weapon, and melee trait. As an action, you fight. If you have no resources in your resource pool, this attack gets +1 damage. As a free triggered ability, during an attack using Fire Axe, spend 1 resource. You get +2 combat for this skill test, limit 3 times per attack, and it takes up a hand slot. One of the best weapons in the Survivor card pool at this time, and I think you can make a pretty good argument this is one of the best weapons in the entire, one of the best level 0 weapons anyway, in the entire card pool. You can't really go wrong with fighting and getting +1 damage, especially when the Fire Axe can help you get 0 resources and boost your combat skill test sky high. +2 is very, very generous for 1 resource, and if you've got the 3 resources, you're at +6. Add 1 more from Dark Horse, and you're +7, and you're not going to miss very often with that. I think the only knock against this card is that you can find yourself in an awkward situation from time to time where you need to make that second or third attack. And you're getting the bonus damage, but you're not getting the skill boost because you've already spent your resources. But other than that, pretty damn good. What do you guys think?
I mean, you pretty much summed it up. I think the only other thing sometimes is that you'll also find yourself in weird damage areas as well, because you want to deal, let's say, like, you want to deal 4 damage, but you also want to have +2 to the test as well. So it's like you find yourself like, okay, I'll save a resource, but now I'm not getting the damage bonus. But if I spend all my resources, then I don't have enough boost to get me through that second test. So like you were saying, like, you really have to kind of dial in when you are not going to use that ability. But I mean, it's so good. And some investigators, you just spam that ability. Preston, for instance, can just spam that all day, which is great. Maybe even someone like Jenny, like you were saying earlier, Matt. You could use Jenny. She accumulates a bunch of extra resources. She can just mow things down with a Fire Axe.
Yep.
I mean, it also costs 1 in a hand slot. Like, that is super cheap for a bonus damage. That's, whoo, man. Yeah, that's real good.
Yeah, in fact, Jenny's a good example because this is an example of a card that is an outlet for Jenny's extra resources. Because if she's reloading 2 resources every turn, that's helping her, boost her Fire Axe attacks, which is really great. I think the one thing stopping the Fire Axe is what you were saying, Mr. Lang, about how sometimes if you want to land 2 damage attacks, that's going to be kind of tough because you spend all your boosts getting to the 2 damage and then you're out of boosts going into the second attack. Which is why I think the way to do it, if you really want to lean into Fire Axe, is you also include things like overpowers. So that, you get those extra icons to kind of, keep your momentum going so you can land multiple 2 damage attacks. It means that as great as Fire Axe is, I think it's not the be-all and end-all, because I think you need some extra support in the form of combat icons for when, to kind of get multiple attacks over the line.
Yeah. I think Fire Axe is just that great role player. Like, it's a good enough weapon on its own, but when you start kind of like piecing all of these other cards together, like, they create something that's, greater than the sum of their parts.
Oh, that's what you meant by role player. I thought you meant like investigators are role playing as firemen.
I mean, that too.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Jenny, she's like fire axing the locked door down, and
I got it. You have to say, "Here's Jenny."
It is worth noting that in the Path to Carcosa Investigator Expansion, survivors receive an ally, Madame Lebranche, who can give you a resource when you have no resources, which plays very well with Fire Axe and Dark Horse, and is another way of alleviating this sort of awkward situation where you can end up not having the combat bonuses you need because you can spend down your resources using Fire Axe. You run out of resources, Madame Lebranche chips in one as a free triggered ability, then you can attack again at +2 and get the +1 damage, which is obviously very, very nice. It is, you do need to include a lot more, I think, combat icons with this, but again, if you're playing this in somebody like Ashcan, this makes a perfect side weapon if you're using Duke, because Duke attacks, he does the damage, then you can, if you don't want to ready Duke, or you can't ready Duke because you've already used him that turn, the Fire Axe can come in, you can spend down your resources and get another couple of attacks in, so it works very, very well in Ashcan. How would we rate this one?
I think in Core and Dunwich, this is another Elder Sign for me. This card's really, really strong. It's a great role player in a lot of decks, and, you know, like you were saying, it combos well with Dark Horse, it combos well with Ashcan Pete, combos well with Jenny, we could go on and on and on.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I would agree. I think in this these two sets, it's an Elder Sign. This, like, you can go through a whole campaign with relying on Fire Axe, never having to upgrade your weapon. Yeah, of the investigators who can take it, this is pretty good. I mean, it's even pretty good in Gym because being able to spend a couple of resources to deal a single damage will save shriveling charges. Like, even like Jim likes this card. Like, this is pretty good. I'd give it an Elder Sign in these in the context of Core and Dunwich. I think later on, as you were saying with Dark Horse, I think as your card pool gets bigger, you kind of want to lean in. You want to like lean into the low resource build. But given the choices you have now, then this is good. This is the good one. Yeah.
While we're talking about investigators, we'd be remiss if we also didn't mention Zoe, because she does get the resource from engaging an enemy, and then you can spend that resource to get extra damage from the Fire Axe. I believe I managed to kill Haster with a Fire Axe when I played through the Path to Carcosa.
Don't make us all take horror. Come on, man.
So yeah, this is an Elder Sign. It's one of the at this period of time in Core and Dunwich, it's one of the best weapons in the game. Certainly considering the options you have in Survivor. I mean, you've got baseball bat and knife. Are those the only two I'm thinking of?
Oh, that's right.
So,
Yeah.
And baseball bat is kind of awkward because it takes up 2 hands, and if you draw a skull, you lose your bat. So Fire Axe comes along on the scene and kind of nudges it out of the way as well. And yeah, just an all-round amazing card for survivors, especially if you are playing a Dark Horse build. That brings us to Newspaper. It is a 1-cost asset with a intellect skill icon item trait. You get +2 intellect while investigating if you have no clues, and it takes up a hand slot. Unfortunately, I think all the positive things we've had to say about the Survivor card pool so far are kind of going to come to a bit of a halt here. It looks like a magnifying glass on the surface, but I have found this card very difficult to use.
Yeah, the biggest issue with this card is that the game requires you to grab multiple clues at a time. You don't just grab a clue, spend it, grab a clue, spend it. Then a card like this would be pretty good, you know, if that was how the game operated. But the game often asks you to grab 3 clues, 5 clues, 8 clues if you're playing multiplayer. You know, you're grabbing lots of clues all at once. So playing something like Newspaper it helps you grab that first clue, but then after that, it just does nothing but sit in your hand.
Yeah.
It'd be nice if you could like bap a ghoul in the nose with it or something.
That would be pretty funny, actually. Like, or maybe you can hide your knife in the newspaper, and like the combo takes up one hand slot. Like, bam.
Yeah, like the
Pocket
fact that
knife.
it takes up a hand slot is rough
Yeah,
too.
yeah, that's true.
If it didn't take up a hand slot, I think it would almost be kind of playable because then there'd be like a couple intellect tests you'd make throughout the game where this would be good.
Yeah, if you have a small card pool, it's not the very worst thing you can do. I'm thinking, no,
I think
but
the
both.
issue is that flashlight, I believe, costs 2, right?
Yeah, just play
And
flashlight.
and you get
Yeah.
eight of those.
Yeah, you can play flashlight, and I mean, if you really want to, you can play perceptions over newspaper.
Yeah, and perception
You're
always
probably
works.
better off. Yeah. Oh, I feel like newspaper. I can see why you would want it if you're playing as if you're playing a survivor, and you're not expected to investigate very often. Like, I can see why you would play newspaper. I mean, at least newspaper only costs 1 to like sometimes do a thing. Yeah. If there was an easy way to like give clues to your friends, then this would get a lot better.
That would be
Yeah.
cool.
That would be
If there
actually
was a
pretty
way-
cool.
That'd be cool if you could like give clues to other players, and then this would be like
Yeah.
a nice way to constantly kind of grab clues off the board and hand it to other people.
Yeah. But I think as is, like, I think it's not the worst thing you can do because it will do a thing once or twice in the game, and it only costs 1, which means if you lose it to like Crypt Chill, you don't feel so bad.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
gonna say the other big defense is that Crypto is a very common encounter card in a lot of the scenarios in
Yeah.
Dunwich. So having newspaper to kind of just absorb that can be nice sometimes. Also,
Yeah.
Essex County, it takes a lot of your assets from you.
Yeah, that's true. So I feel like this one, I don't think you want it if you're Wendy, because Wendy just play lockpicks instead. I don't think you want it as Ashcan Pete because Duke is just going to get. You want to be getting lots of clues anyway with Duke. So we're looking at off class. We're looking at off class survivors. So like, okay, so maybe Agnes, because you could take 2 flashlights and like maybe 2 newspapers, and there you go. You're clue support, and you just play shrivelings, and you don't have to worry about rite of seekings at that point. Like maybe there's something to be said about that. Yeah.
But Rite of Seeking is so good. Like, why would you just play that?
Because it's expensive, and
I guess.
yeah.
But
Like if you've already got Rex at your table, then you may not need to do Rite of Seeking. Yeah, so I'm just digressing about all the different investigators. I just don't think that the 2 survivors that we have access to right now want this card, especially now that Lockpicks is in the revised core. And Wendy can just take that. Yeah. But if you're playing some of the survivors down the line, like for example, I've seen this played a few times in Silas, where it's like he has no business investigating, except for like the 1 or 2 turns he does, with the newspaper. Yeah, then I can kind of see that working. Right.
Yeah, this card probably works. I don't know. It's tough if you're playing multiplayer. There's going to be so many clues on the table that it's going to be hard to use this unless you spend your clues in an appropriate way. So the person with the newspaper is always the one dumping their clues, so they actually get another use of newspaper. I have played this in solo, and basically, depending on the scenario, it's good for 1 clue an act, which, I don't know, at that point you really got to decide whether it's worth it. I mean, more the card slot. I mean, it's so cheap, but the bonus you're getting is quite generous, but for 1 clue an act, I don't know, to me, it's just not worth it. If we did have a way of dumping clues in some way, like the only investigator I can really think of who could, and I'm not even sure if we have, I mean, the Seekers do have a way to dump clues with some of their cards. What's his name? Dr. William T. Mallison can do it.
Oh, that's right.
Quick Study as well.
quick study. I don't think quick study's in the card pool yet, though. So there are ways to dump clues, but I don't think we really have the support for it yet. So yeah, this is a tough one. I think if you really need the investigation boost, you could consider it, but I don't know. I think you're probably better off playing other cards at this point.
I think newspaper could be good in a scenario like Midnight Masks, where false leads and stuff like that are all over the place, and it's like forcing you to like drop the clue back on the location. Then I could see this being better than Flashlight, because, you know, Flashlight, you got to spend charges on it, and, you know, it takes a little more effort to get the clues in the first place. Whereas, you know, if you have newspaper in that situation, it's still on, which is nice. So maybe if you're playing a scenario like that, the newspaper is worth picking up in your deck. But
yeah, in that scenario, you're also spending clues more frequently to buy the cultists. So you're not necessarily stuck with a pile of clues on your investigator all the time. So you grab a clue with this, a couple other clues, spend them. Grab more clues with this, spend them. So as long as I think it works particularly well in scenarios that have a lot of acts, which, granted, there aren't that many of them in the game, even to this day, that have, you know, where you've got to go through a lot of different acts. Or you're able to spend clues on something else. But generally speaking, I think this one comes up short a lot of the time. How would I should mention before we keep going, there is a level 2 upgrade for newspaper in Dim Carcosa, which is now part of the Path to Carcosa Investigator Expansion. I believe this one, if you have no clues, you get 2 clues instead of 1, if I remember correctly.
That's actually pretty good.
So that actually helps a little bit, because you can, especially if you're playing solo and you end up on one of those locations that has 2 clues on it, this can help you clear it. Again, you're kind of stuck once you do, but at least it gives you the 2 clues instead of the 1. How would we rate this one?
I'm going to give it an elder thing. I think there are scenarios where you can make pretty good use out of newspaper, like we were saying earlier, but I think the majority of scenarios just ask you to kind of grab like 2 to 3 clues in 3 acts. So you're really only getting like 2 or 3 boosts out of this. And at that point, you know, it's got to sit on the table taking up your hand slot that entire time. And that's just not great.
You know, I think the more we talk and think about it, the more I realize, like, just play Flashlight. You know, you were saying, like, at best you're looking at this thing providing 3 boosts or so. Flashlight does the same thing. In fact, it's even better because it lowers the shroud. So yeah, just play Flashlight. I'd say give this. Honestly, the more I think about this, the more I think it's an auto fail, because Flashlight does the same thing but better. To be honest,
yeah, I think I've got to go with auto fail on this one. I think I played this card briefly during the Dunwich Legacy, and then I haven't played it since. It's just not... It doesn't do enough, even for 1 resource. Generally speaking, I'm able to get clues in other ways. And so this card just ends up being... Like, if it did something else, or there was a way you could shuffle those clues off or move them around in some way so you could keep getting newspaper bonuses, it would be better. But as it is, it's just a really bad magnifying glass. And
no.
I think, especially with the Dunwich investigators who can take cards from other classes, I mean, if you need a magnifying glass effect, just take magnifying glass. Don't waste your time with this.
Yeah, I mean, in comparison to mag glass, certainly. But in Dunwich, there are, I think, enough scenarios to warrant something like this. Like, you've got the museum, where you're spending clues to put the locations into play. You've got Essex County, which requires you to spend clues in order to move from train to train. You've got Blood on the Altar, which requires you to spend clues to look at the things underneath the locations. Like, I think there's enough there.
All right, Nate, you convinced me. I'm moving my rating up to Elder Thing because
Yeah, let's go.
yeah, I'm moving it up to Elder Thing. I'm thinking newspaper. If you look at it as like your third flashlight, like I'm envisioning an investigator where you take like the only support cards you have for being your secondary or even like your tertiary clue getter is 2 flashlights, 2 newspapers. I'm thinking like Agnes, where you like don't do.
I was thinking Pete, right? Where like Pete can
Yeah.
use the newspaper to grab the first clue, and then he can use Duke to grab the rest of the clues.
Yeah, I get it. I get it. Yeah, I'll bring it up to another thing.
Yeah, let's go.
Yeah.
Can I get a 0? Anybody?
No.
No. I didn't even get
Flashlight
a 0.
exists. Flashlight, like if Flashlight were like a seeker card, and like you'd actually have to like have access to Flashlight, then yeah, but no.
Yeah.
Flashlight's neutral, so no.
Yeah. I am not going to be so charitable, and I am going to keep my my auto fail for this one. Don't play it. I don't think I've even played the level 2 version, to be honest. It's not a card that I put in my decks anymore.
I will say one thing I like about the level 2 version is if you think of it like a 1-cost event that lets you at some point discover a clue, maybe twice. I think that might be worth it. Maybe, if you think of it like that.
That brings us to Peter Sylvestre, big man on campus. He is a 3-cost asset with a willpower skill icon ally in Miskatonic trait. You get +1 agility. As a response, after your turn ends, heal 1 horror from Peter Sylvestre. He has 1 health, 2 sanity, and takes up an ally slot. Man, oh man. Peter is probably one of the best cards that was released in this cycle, and he continues to be one of the best allies, certainly in the Survivor card pool, if not the entire game.
Well,
I have played the crap out of this card.
Well, let's be honest. It's really the level 2 version that is like the best ally ever. Right?
True. Yeah.
It's really the level 2 version. Not that the level 0 version is terrible. It's really the level 2 version that puts it over the top.
It's more just the level 2 version is just pushed beyond belief, but yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I think Peter is really like what every other ally gets held up against.
Oh, yeah.
Regards. Like he provides you a stat boost. His effect is going to be something that you need almost at every single point in the game.
Yeah.
You can build a whole deck around just using Peter's ability with Carolyn.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true.
He is a linchpin in Carolyn. You cannot play Carolyn without Peter. Like it's that critical. And you're getting +1 to a stat, and then with the level 2 you get +2 to a stat. It's ridiculous. Like I mean, this card just does so much for so little.
Yeah.
And now that we especially have lockpicks, and Wendy is taking this, now Wendy is basically unkillable and getting a +1 to her lockpicks as well.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so the thing about the level 0 one is that it boosts agility, and at least at this stage in the card pool, agility is kind of capped as to what it can do. Like you can't kill things with agility at this point. I mean, later you're gonna get Waylay, which has Wendy on the art, by the way, but you're not. Agility is kind of limited. Like you're not discovering clues with agility, and you're not defeating enemies with agility at this point. So the level 0 one is like it's kind of capped. The level 2 one, it's the fact that it adds to willpower, because then that is Agnes's primary stat, and the reason why I like to call her, Agnes's boyfriend, because they're the match made in heaven.
Yeah,
it's like at this point, who's Aquina? Like who is Aquina? Just have her, just throw her out at this point.
Yeah, it's hard to like talk about the level 0 version in isolation of because the level 2 version, like it's just so ubiquitous. And you're, of course, going to upgrade the level 0 version into the level 2 version, because why wouldn't you?
Why wouldn't you? Yeah. In fact, that's the point. It's like you put Peter Sylvestre level 0 in there just as like the temporary holding area to like reserve the space, for the level 2 version, because that's really what you want. Yeah. Yeah. Even if you're not Agnes, though, the reason why the level 2 version is so strong is because he can take 2 points of He could take 2 points of sanity before, and just like kind of recharge it, as opposed to taking only a single point and having to wait to recharge it. Yeah, or heal it, however you want to call it.
I have to say that Peter Sylvestre, I think both the level 0 version and the level 2 that we'll talk about in a moment, he wins games. I mean, there have been so many games where I have taken an excessive amount of horror and all of it just evaporates because whenever you fail the rotting remains, you might take one yourself, Peter takes one, you heal it away. You take another horror, Peter heals it, goes away. There was a recent game where I think I had just had even Peter level 0, and he did so much work for me. I probably would have been driven insane long before I reached the end of the scenario, and Peter just chugs along. And one of the hardest decisions I think you'll make in this game is when to kill Peter, because that doesn't feel very good, because now you know you're in tough straits. Peter is so good that honestly, the survivor allies at this time, I mean, he's up against Aquina and Stray Cat. And it's not doesn't have a lot of very tough competition to tackle, and even to this day, it's playing, especially with agility getting better, it's awfully difficult to play other allies over Peter, because survivors do tend to lean into that agility a little bit more, and it's a great way to deal with enemies, especially in solo. If you can evade them, you don't have to waste all those actions fighting them. Simply get away, and Peter helps you do that. The other thing to note is that I don't think it's necessarily true with these survivors that we have in this box, Ash, Ken, Wendy, and Agnes, but survivors generally tend to have kind of crappy willpower, a lot of them, so they are vulnerable to taking horror. Some of them are, not all of them. But as your card pool expands, you'll get somebody like Silas who has 2 willpower and will just get beaten up by the encounter deck. Peter can backstop him, and he can go a long way. How would we rate the level 0 version?
I mean, I'm still going to give it an Elder Sign. It's still really good, especially considering that the competition is Aquina and Stray Cat. Like, come on. Like, you're going to play this card. Don't fool yourself.
Yeah,
and Agnes especially, she can take Forbidden Knowledge, and now you have this engine of Forbidden Knowledge plus Peter, and now I'm generating Jenny levels amounts of resources.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, and I was even sitting here thinking, even in Gym, like Peter level 0 is how you can like survive all those skulls you draw off of Shriveling.
Mm-hmm.
You just put it on Peter. Yeah, this guy's really good. In the context of Core and Dunwich, I'd say level 0 Peter is an Elder Sign. As your card pool expands, like you have more choices, at the level 0. I wouldn't even, honestly, I don't even really want to consider Stray Cat an actual ally. It's really like an event, kinda, because you just kind of sit it there until you need it. But yeah, it's way better than Aquina, that's for sure. Yeah, it's an Elder Sign. He's super good. He's boyfriend for everyone. Everyone in Arkham, he's their boyfriend. Everyone knows Peter. Everyone's been on a date with Peter.
Yeah, Peter is hands down better than all the survivor allies available at this time. I think in Agnes, he actually does have some competition from the Arcane Initiate, simply because...
Oh, true, yeah.
Agnes does like her spells, and Arcane Initiate will find them, but Peter makes a great follow-up play, so you get your Arcane Initiate down early, you find the spells you need, whether it's Shriveling or Rite of Seeking or whatnot, and then you kill the Arcane Initiate. Peter arrives on the scene and backstops her for the rest of the scenario, healing horror as necessary. Now, the important thing to remember about Agnes's ability is that if you place the horror on Peter, you do not get to deal the damage. So keep that in mind. But there are times when you're playing Agnes that you are going to take horror, and you're not going to be getting a damage out of it. That's the horror that you're passing off to Peter so he can heal that horror, and Agnes can save her sanity pool for to trigger her response. This guy, I mean, what can you say? He's an elder sign all the way, and just very, very solid. A huge asset to the survivor card pool.
Yeah, I would like to make one more footnote at level 0. At level 0, Peter actually combos very well with a neutral card, Painkillers, because then you're using Peter to effectively heal damage. Because you can heal with Painkillers, put the horror from Painkillers on Peter, which is kind of weird, right? Like, you chug the Painkillers and Peter.
Listen, it doesn't have to make sense, okay? Listen, it doesn't have to make sense. That's a great combo in Carolyn. Carolyn is basically an unkillable monster once she has Peter Sylvestre in play, if you haven't realized.
Yeah, it's true. So I guess what I'm getting at is even if you're not like leaning into Peter, and you're not even if you don't even need the horror, the fact that Painkillers combos well with Peter is like pretty good. Yeah, is what I'm getting at here. Yeah, and that's just at level 0. That's before you even get into the level 2 stuff. Yeah.
Speaking of level 2, Peter Sylvestre has an upgrade. 3-cost asset, 1 willpower skill icon. Basically the same across the board, except you get +1 agility and +1 willpower. And he has the same response, and he has an extra sanity, so now he can soak 2 sanity instead of 1. Between the bonus willpower in that extra room in his sanity to soak even more. If level 0 Peter was good, level 2 Peter is simply amazing.
Yeah.
I think if he had been designed in more recently, he would probably cost 3 XP.
Yeah.
At least. He does seem a little underpriced compared to some of the other allies in the game, but man, oh man, this guy is, like you said, Nate, this is the ally that all other allies are rated against, and unfortunately, many of them come up short to Peter. I guess we have talked a little bit about Peter level 2 in our level 0 discussion. It's kind of hard to discuss them separately because usually if you're playing Peter level 0, you're upgrading to Peter level 2 as quickly as possible. I guess what I would like to ask you guys is, does he warrant a curse token?
Kinda. Personally, I think like, because Peter exists, and like we were saying, like he is sort of this like litmus test for every other ally in the game. I think it has kind of pushed all of the other allies to either measure up to Peter in some respect, whether it's something like Lola or Delilah, who kind of like have this sort of similar stat line and double boosting and some really good effect, or I don't know. That's a really good question. I think he certainly treads the line, but I think the difference with something like that versus Lola is that at least with Peter, he's purely reactive, where he prevents you from losing. He doesn't necessarily help you win, per se, but he makes it a lot harder to lose.
Yeah, it's because his ability is not offensive. Like you can't use it to push the scenario to its conclusion. One thing I have noticed is that he's the first card, except technically Dark Horse, that boosts 2 stats, and and that kind of it like him, and of course the allies that have come after him that also boost 2 stats. That kind of was what really solidifies the ally slot as being like probably the strongest slot. Yeah, like numerically, like
what you're getting out of it for your cost.
What you're getting at it, like there are weapons, like weapons don't give you two different, don't give you 2 different stat boosts. Like there are very, very few accessories that give you 2 stat boosts. Like it, Peter level 2 pushes allies in particular down that 2 stat boost path, and I think that alone kind of makes it a curse token because it kind of pushes the rest of the card pool to like measure up. His ability is, although very strong, and it's still just defensive in nature. You're not going to use it. You can't rush the scenario with Peter level 2 by absorbing more horror. It helps you not die, but you don't. It's not going to like win the game for you. Other than you last long enough to win the game. Yeah.
Right, and even in Carolyn, who like I think is kind of like the strongest case you could make for calling it a curse token is that she's really just using Peter to generate an extra resource every turn.
Yeah.
Or 2 if you have Forbidden Knowledge in play. But like that's kind of the extent of it. I think like what makes Peter so good is just he makes you so consistently good. Like +1 willpower is one of the best boosts you can get out of an ally, I think. That or maybe like combat or intellect.
Yeah.
Like those are the 3 best stats in the game, and giving a boost to one of them plus agility is just it's so good.
Yeah. Oh, then like imagine Wendy having 5 and 5.
Right, and Agnes goes up to 6 and 4.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's like it's a combination of like the investigators that can take Peter naturally benefit from his stat boost, but then his ability is also just really, really good on top of that.
Yeah, and then you also compare him to like other allies that are available at this point, like Joey the Rat and Hired Muscle, and Milan's really good.
Yeah, I was gonna say Milan is good.
Milan's very good, yeah, but Peter's better because it gives you 2 stats. Yeah. So I think the thing about Peter like is that it's the 2 stat boosts that really gives him a 1-up on every other ally, pretty much every other ally, and then it kind of pushes card design towards that 3 XP. It's often 3 XP, 3 cost, 2 stat boosts, and it kind of outperforms all the other slots as a result.
And they've even made an ally similar to Peter in Jessica Hyde, who costs 1 experience and has a handicap where she enters play with damage on her. So it's like I think the designers clearly saw that Peter was, at the very least, very, very good.
Yeah.
When they designed Jessica Hyde.
Yeah, it's also worth arguing that I've noticed in the last few cycles they've been rushing to give other classes Peter-like allies to catch up. Namely, Ikiak from Innsmouth. She's like the first Mystic ally that gives you 2 stat boosts, and she's like
Jean Beauregard from
Janae. Yeah. It just seems like something came around, and some designers realized, we got to have other allies that catch up to Peter. Yeah. It's all a long-winded way of saying that he's really pushed the design of allies, and I think that kind of makes him a curse token. Yeah. He's not egregious, like, he's not stealing lunches like Strange Solution Acidic Ichor is, but still, like, the way he's pushing allies.
Yeah.
I think he's definitely pushed. I mean, that's pretty clear. He is head and shoulders above every other Survivor ally available right at when it was released. Stray Cat and Porraquina are just, they're garbage compared to Peter. So it's really not a competition. I have a really hard time giving him a curse token, though. Maybe it's the solo player in me needing that little extra boost. Mm-hmm. But I feel like the fact that he is more defensive in nature sort of salvages him from being cursed. Like, he is very nice to have on the table, but you can win without him. But I definitely see where you're both coming from. I mean,
I'm a bit reluctant to give him a curse token too. Like, I do think that he is sort of the start of a larger problem when it comes to the ally slot.
Mm-hmm.
But I play so much Carolyn. I love Peter. Like
Would you
Peter.
play Carolyn? Would you still play Peter if he only boosted one stat?
Oh yeah, without question. You play
There you
him for
go.
the ability in Carolyn.
Yeah. So in Carolyn, you're playing him for the ability. I think in like
Yeah.
almost everybody else, you're playing him for the additional stat.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like honestly, in most of the decks that I've put Peter in, it's for the ability to not die.
Oh yeah. Because the ability doesn't change.
Right.
Is what I'm getting at. It's
Mhm.
you're spending those 2 XP for like really for the additional stat.
Yeah.
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 All right. Well, how would we rate Peter Sylvestre level 2?
I'm gonna give him the Elder Sign. He's my boy. I can't do him like that, so I gotta give him the Elder Sign.
Yeah. Okay, so I am gonna give him a curse token. It's not egregious. It's because he's really pushed the ally slot as the game continued to grow. He's really pushed the ally slot and really solidified the ally slot as being like really head and shoulders amongst, compared to other assets. So he's not the most egregious curse. It's not a Sita kicker, but it's still curse in that he's kind of pushed the design of cards. Yeah,
I'll give you that.
Yeah,
I'll give you that because I feel like accessory kind of gets the short end of the stick with that one.
Yeah, I agree.
Because like the one of the biggest benefits for having an ally in play is that it has soak.
Yep.
And accessories don't do that.
Right.
So yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
I think today he's clearly a curse. It is worth noting that he has not made it on the list of taboos. They have not mutated him to add an experience point, which I could definitely see them doing. Like if they made him cost 3 XP instead of 2, I don't think you'd have many players batting an eye about that. I think in terms of Dunwich and Revised Core, he's clearly an Elder Sign. I mean, survivors just don't have any other options that are even remotely as good as Peter. Agnes loves Peter. I mean, pretty much every investigator who can take Peter loves Peter. And, I mean, he basically defines how Agnes is played. I don't think we've received an ally since that can really contest him for the ally slot in Agnes, at least the way I play her.
Yeah.
I don't. So I definitely think Dunwich Revised Core, he's an Elder Sign. If you're not playing Peter level 2 and you're playing some other ally, if you're playing Ashcan, Wendy, Agnes, you got to have a pretty damn good reason why. And I know, I think we rated Aquina level 2 when she was reprinted in the Revised Core. I think we were fairly generous to her because at that time she was sort of the only thing survivors had in the ally slot, and Peter just sort of comes over and just kicks her off the cliff, unfortunately. But I think these days he's clearly pushed. He's hands down one of the strongest allies in the game. Probably needs to cost slightly more XP, but I mean, like Nate said, Peter is my boyfriend as well, and him and I have had some fine adventures in the Arkham Horror LCG, and he has I don't have any statistics to back this up, but if I went back and looked at games, my wins and losses, I think that Peter plays a pretty big role in a lot of those wins. Not because he won me the game, but he just gave me a shot at winning, and that is often all you need. Because if you go insane, you don't have a chance, and Peter will keep you going, and it is a very sad time indeed when you have to put that third horror on him and be like, well, I guess for the rest of the scenario we're flying solo, so hopefully we draw our second copy of Peter, or we finish this game because we don't have our sanity, our horror soak anymore. But
I'll share a quick fun story with everyone. I played Dim Carcosa with Carolyn and had Peter level 2. I managed to heal off almost 20 points of horror off of Peter by the end of the game.
Yeah, I believe it. Because I think I've also played Carolyn with Peter and Dim Carcosa at a similar circumstance.
It was incredible. It was awesome.
That's going to do it for our look at the first batch of Survivor cards in the Dunwich Legacy Investigator Expansion. Let us know in the comments down below what you think. Man, we were talking before we recorded this video. This is probably the strongest batch of cards that we've looked at so far, and I know what's coming up, and I know we're not going to look at a stronger batch, so...
No, we're not.
I mean, Elder Sign, yeah, newspaper's bad, but then
Whatever.
top it off with two more, like 4 Elder Signs out of 5 cards. That's pretty much unprecedented and just goes to show how good Survivors got it in the Dunwich Legacy.
Yeah. And below, in the comment section, we want to hear your Peter stories. Tell us your Peter stories, because we love them. Right, Nate?
Oh, absolutely. He's the big man on campus.
Yep.
That's going to do it for this episode. If you enjoyed what you hear, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. If you need to contact me, I can be reached at manfromleng@gmail.com. I'm also on Twitter at manfromleng. Until the stars are right, keep your shotgun close and your Elder Sign closer. Take care out there, and happy investigating.